I'm Douglas Jacoby, or Jacoby, if you live in the British Commonwealth nations, and it's a pleasure to speak now on Armageddon. Is there going to be a literal battle of Armageddon, as Revelation 16 is interpreted by some to mean? Should we be preparing for World War III, this battle that will usher in the return of Christ, at least in popular theology? Armageddon is mentioned in Revelation, but also many times in the Old Testament. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it in just a moment. Revelation was written at the end of the first century. The Roman Empire was on a collision course with the church because for the first time the emperors were demanding not only sacrifice, but worship and the confession that Caesar is Lord. No Christian could say Caesar is Lord because they've already made Jesus Lord. And it was heating up especially in the area around Ephesus, the province of Asia, what would be considered today Western Turkey. And so what is Armageddon? Well, the word itself is actually a phrase. In Hebrew, Har is mountain or hill. Megiddo was a city, was one of Solomon's cities, in fact. And so Armageddon, or the mountain of Megiddo, was a site of many battles in the ancient world. Battles centering around the city of Megiddo and the Jezreel Valley, which is right next to it. Now, I'm going to take a symbolic interpretation of this whole thing. Revelation, after all, has hundreds of allusions to the Old Testament, many of them highly metaphorical. Revelation, 404 verses, perhaps 500 Old Testament images. Around this area, Armageddon, which you can visit, by the way, I've been there many times to Armageddon, there were at least 12 battles fought before the time of Christ. There was one fought soon after Jesus' lifetime, and at least 21 in the years after the first century. And so it's a very apt image for a conflict. In the Old Testament, you remember in Judges 4, you have the battle between Deborah and Barak, and you remember Sisera and Jabin when they got thrashed. Also in the same place, Pharaoh Necho killed King Josiah. I'm just letting you know you are familiar already with Armageddon. Let me just read a little bit of the chapter. 16:1. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the seven angels, "Go, pour out the 7 bowls of God's wrath on the earth." Pouring out bowls, wrath, plagues, it connects us to the 10 plagues of Exodus, the plagues against Egypt. The first angel went and poured out his bowl on the land, and ugly, festering sores broke out on the people who had the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. This is an allusion to emperor worship. It made them hideous. It made them ugly. People had the mark of the beast. And it has nothing to do with your physical appearance. It has to do with where your loyalty is. Are you going through the motions of Christianity, whereas Caesar is really Lord, or is Jesus truly Lord? The book of Revelation shows that Rome is inspired by Satan. This world power will eventually fall. It doesn't seem like it now. It would have felt very unlikely that this prophecy would be realized, that Rome would fall. But in Revelation, we get a peek behind the curtains. We realize that she will fall, internally through corruption, externally through invasions. And in a sense, she already has fallen. Now let's fast forward to Revelation 16:16. This is our verse. Then they gathered the kings together to the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. And so there's an Old Testament background. Armageddon is a battle site. The plagues that are described in Revelation were not fulfilled literally, yet all the same, Rome would fall. And this would be just. She would fall through the invasions, plagues, corruption, and so forth. Not only would she fall, but Revelation shows that she's already fallen. And she's exposed for being a cheap harlot, as we see in chapter 17. The God whom the Romans are defying is in control. He is the one in charge of the entire universe. And God comes against Rome through natural disaster, economic slumps, inept and pleasure-seeking leadership, stupid laws, brutality in the government, invading armies, and so forth. And all these warning signs she ignores, and she doesn't repent, she doesn't get ready. As Revelation 12 shows, Satan, the dragon, is the true power behind Rome. Therefore, we should not be impressed by her power or her false wonders, because she's in direct opposition to the Lord Almighty. And right after this chapter, we'll read about the great harlot, and in chapter 18 to 19, we'll read about her fall as if it's already taken place. And so Revelation is filled with many ways of describing God's ultimate defeat of Satan. While strictly speaking, Revelation 16 is about Rome, yet the cosmic truths behind this description could just as well refer to any enemy of God. Rome has no chance. There are many obstacles to taking the language of Revelation literally. And I'm afraid that pop religious radio speakers and TV evangelists are misleading many. After all, this Battle of Armageddon, and there have been dozens of them, the earliest one is 4,400 years ago. Armageddon is an image for war, for this ultimate conflict. It reminds us of the battles. So what would Revelation 16:16, Armageddon, conjure up in the mind of a reader or listener in ancient times, someone familiar with Old Testament history? If you're in America, what would Gettysburg mean to you? It would mean something. It was a turning point of the Civil War. For a European, Normandy has a meaning. Waterloo. See, there's a symbolism behind this. The focus is not on history, but it's on theology. What is God trying to tell his people? Simply this, that the forces of good will ultimately triumph over the forces of evil, because Rome is not ultimately sovereign. There's going to be a battle, there's going to be showdown, and we'll see that only Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. In conclusion, there will be no literal battle of Armageddon, despite what the radio guys say. Yet through the millennia, there have been many literal battles in Armageddon, which makes it such a great picture. It's an encouraging picture. It's an apt picture of the cosmic battle between God and Satan. For our struggle is not with flesh and blood, but with the spiritual powers. And God assures us in this book of the Bible that he will vanquish every cause that sets itself up against the Son of God. In order to walk the walk of a disciple, we need this assurance. If this is not a literal battle, then there's no way we can prepare for it physically. And yet both testaments urge us to be always ready to meet God. So rather than stockpiling water, canned goods, and ammunition, as some survivalist groups practice, it's the Lord's will that we store up righteousness and good deeds, sharing what we have with as many as possible. That's how we overcome the dragon. If you'd like more on this, the CD series Revelation and the End of the World has 3 hours of teaching and 60 pages of notes. Or perhaps you'll join the premium website and become a member and listen to more than 10 podcasts on end times related topics. That's my view on Armageddon.